Hi, and welcome to another episode of Money Talk, where we don't just talk about money, where to find it, how to make it, but what to do with it after you get it. Well, stay tuned today because we're going to talk about something that we haven't spoken about before. And think of it as a windfall. Think of it as, well, complicated, but only if you are not working with the right people. So, I have two requests for you. One is stay tuned because we'll be right back. Linda gave me the courage, the confidence to move forward.
And after I was finished with Linda K's training, I was at the next level.
It's Linda K. But when you trust that piece of you that says, I got something to give, I have something to say, you know you've got something to do.
Get on your feet, shake your hands in the air. Welcome to the stage, Linda K.
So, as I promised today, we have a very, very special guest. And I don't know if you've ever been at an event, but it kind of starts like this. Dearly beloved, we are gathered together today to celebrate the life of dear aunt or dear uncle so-and-so. And they loved everybody. But maybe they didn't trust everyone, or maybe they never got around to it. But the point is that they died without a will. They died without a trust. And that means that they've gone into probate. So if you own anything worthwhile, you got to protect it. And today we're going to talk about the very topic that we are about to embark on if you don't have your business taken care of at the end of your life. Welcome to the stage, Bill Gross.
Good morning.
We're trying to get you. There you are. Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. So as I started out talking about the very thing that we really want to avoid, it's probate. But you are the probate expert. As a matter of fact, you have a podcast about probate. You talk about it weekly. And you would think it would be a topic that everybody would figure out, boy, we just got it together, but they didn't really. Talk to us just briefly. What causes an estate to go into probate?
Well, a lot of things, but the most common is somebody passes and they did not properly plan for that. So the heirs need to go to court to kind of get approval or get authorization or clean up the mess. And so really, the way I try to describe it is title is the problem and probate is the solution. The property wasn't titled in a way that it passed easily or efficiently. And in order to fix it, you have to go to court and ask for help to get things fixed.
Okay, that's sort of the top-down view, but let's kind of dig into it just a little bit at a time. Mm-hmm. So the one thing that controls a property, a real estate property, is title. And so as title says who owns it, who has the authorization for ownership on the property. But it becomes clouded. When we say clouded, it means that you can't easily sell, or you can't sell at all that property if there's cloud on title. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different scenarios, but one might be, a person, man, woman, owns a property and then they get married. So you might think, well, automatically, when I'm married, it becomes, if I pass, it goes to my wife. Well, that person might have had a prior wife. That person might have had a prior wife with prior children. They may want everything to go to the new wife, but if they don't specify it in the way they hold title, then it won't transfer automatically, and you have to go to court to kind of fix that problem. Or mom and dad might own a property. The biggest misconception in California in particular, the biggest misconception is if you have a will, that will transfer the property. And that might transfer personal property and some assets, but it won't transfer real property, real estate. And so oftentimes people say, well, I'm the only son and I have a will from mom or dad saying the property is mine. But the property is not yours. It's in title. You need to go to it's titled in the name of mom and dad. Even though you have a will, you have to go to court to effectuate the will. So all the will does is it succeeded the person who passed what their wishes were, but it doesn't actually transfer or effectuate that transfer of title.
Okay. So when we have the will, we think that, gee, that's all I have to do. I just have to put a will in place.
Right.
But when you own a real piece of property, is that the same in every state in the United States?
No, every state has different laws. And then typically each county has different rules. So in some
Okay,
states,
that wasn't confusing.
so in some
Right.
states, the property will pass automatically to the wife, or there's a process by which the wife fills an affidavit out. In California, now I'm not an attorney, but I'm giving business advice here. But if you have a particular case, you should consult an attorney. But in California, there's a dollar amount, changes every year. It used to be 166, I think it's 187. If you have a bank account with like $150,000 in it, there's a process by which you basically fill an affidavit and say to the bank, I'm the wife or I'm the son, and I know I'm the only heir, and this is the only asset, and it totals less than whatever, $150,000, and it should be split as follows. These are the surviving 3 children, 1/3 each. So that's what's called like a small probate process that some states have. Some states will even do that for real estate. But once you get to a certain dollar threshold, then typically the court wants to review the documents as well as give creditors a chance to put their bill into escrow and get paid. So what will happen is, let's say an elderly person passes, but they might have had health care through their Medicare, Medicaid, which is for, poor people or for, people who can't provide their own medical insurance. Well, when you pass, you might think, oh, wow, that's great. I have this money coming. But all of a sudden, out of the blue, the state of California will put a bill in and say, hey, by the way, you owe us $50,000. So the probate process is a way by which the government can also make sure taxes get paid, bills get paid, creditors get paid. So it's not so simple, and each state does have different rules.
That brings up about 1,001 new questions, Bill, because it can be very complicated. Now, and I appreciate you saying that we are not giving legal advice, and we are not, because everybody should consult their own attorney for their own legal advice. But you are a particular expert, and we talked about this earlier. There's a lot of people today, a lot of agents. I don't care what state you're in, but in California in particular, where county to county, we had a lot of reduction in inventory and even a greater reduction in people that were willing to list their properties. And so you have people that would normally refer this kind of business over to an expert like yourself and keeping it and doing it themselves, which can also complicate things in a way that already had a complicated circumstance, even more complicated now. So when viewers, please, when you are dealing with somebody that has an estate, that has somebody in the family that passed, and they didn't have that property in a trust, there is likely going to be a probate. And in other circumstances that Bill just alluded to, do yourself a favor and get out of the way. Get out of the way and give it to an expert, because you could be leaving money on the table. And wouldn't you rather have a referral fee that is not interrupted, that goes through uncomplicated, dealt with by a professional like Bill? So thank you for that, Bill. And that's an important point, because, we do get in our way. We start thinking, oh, I haven't had a deal in a long time. And now all of a sudden we come from scarcity and like, oh my God, I've got to have a transaction. And we put ourselves and our clients in harm's way unnecessarily. So what are some of the other things, Bill, that could affect the estate that would be kind of unexpected? You mentioned Medicaid. Could there be something else, like maybe the house was, I don't know, had a reverse mortgage? What about that? Would something like that be complicated?
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people inherit a property. There's a common case where mom and dad pass, and one of the sons or daughters, typically son, is still living in the property. And because they reverse mortgage, there's no mortgage payment due. So they're living there basically for free. And the reverse mortgage might pay the taxes, insurance as well. Well, at some point, what happens is after 6 months, the reverse mortgage company will check public records and verify the person who has the loan has passed. And they'll send a letter to the house, say, hey, we noticed that mom and dad passed, and you have 6 months to pay us back, and the 6 months has gone by. And so the person living in the house, the common experience is, well, they're living for free. There's no solution for them. There may not be enough equity. If the property is sold, they only get the equity divided by however many heirs there are. Maybe there's 3 other kids. And so that sibling will tend to live in the property for free, hide the fact that they're in foreclosure, and the other siblings find out the hard way when the property is noticed for foreclosure. So I think that it's important
That's
that
awful. Oh my God, Bill, does that
happens
really happen?
all the time,
You
all the
stay in
time.
this business long enough, you see everything, don't you?
all the time. And so now you have somebody who's in the property, and I think that properly siblings are hesitant to kick out their brother or sister, and that person may not have the emotional ability to function. They never had a job, they never really worked, they never were able to afford a place to live on their own, and now they're faced with the possibility of having to leave the property, which means paying rent somewhere for the rest of their life. And so it's a real challenge. How do you help that person? I don't think the answer is to allow them to live for free, unless that's your plan. And in some cases, there are families who are generous enough to allow that to happen. I think better move them into an appropriate property, usually a cheaper property, maybe and set some other solution. So those are the challenges. And then getting them out requires some expertise. People try to do these things on their own, create emotional challenges where nobody wants to get an attorney letter saying you have to move out of a property, and there are people who will fight that. So again, these are complicated situations that require, I think, expert input rather than just something that you do on your own.
Now you bring up another good point, and I found it kind of curious. You said where the son or the daughter, usually the son, are still in the property.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? What you must have an opinion about that.
Well, I think that it's really sad because oftentimes it's a husband and wife who were World War II veterans and raised their family. The American dream was buy a house, raise your family, and they have numerous kids, and a couple of them go on and do great things, and one just doesn't launch for whatever reason. And part of it's society, part of it's the breakdown of communities, the breakdown of values. Part of it is not everybody is able to launch, and people have challenges. And I'm not talking about people with real physical disabilities or, what I would call real psychological disabilities. I'm just talking about people who they were just teenagers that never grew up. They're 40 years old, and they never had a job, never had to pay the bills. And so why does it happen? I don't, it's a broad societal challenge, and we have more and more people like that all the time. And I think the temptation, when people start living for free, the temptation to continue to live for free can overwhelm people. And I think to their detriment, typically.
So it's probably, and I could think of several instances where the mom or the dad, the surviving parent, suddenly becomes disabled themselves, and they need the help. So they move an adult child into the house, and they say, well, it would cost me less to have my child take care of me than for me to be institutionalized and maybe reduce my longevity significantly, or I wouldn't get the standard of care that I have here in my own home. So
Right.
they move the kids back home, and the kids,
Right.
they do an exchange. And in some instances, the kids will pay for something or pay for a portion, and then others, they just live for free. So the circumstance that you're setting up and that you're describing sounds like it's pretty typical, isn't it?
What happens quite a bit. And I think that the challenge with that is that being a caregiver is incompatible with almost any other business or job. And so what I find is that child who took care of mom or dad faithfully and, with great care for 10, 15 years, 5 years, they're now out of the job force. They don't have the skills to re-enter the job force. they're never going to be able to unless they just completely commit themselves for a tough year or two of transition. And so you have to think about that, I think, and plan for that. How is that person going to provide for themselves? Now, if the answer is, I'm going to give everything to them in exchange for the caregiver, okay, then that's a decision you should make while you're alive. Because the problem is, if that's one of 3 or 4 kids, the other 3 kids sometimes will say, hey, they deserve it. They took care of mom and dad and they gave up their career and they should have everything. Very often they'll say, hey, that house is 1/4 mine and my other siblings, and we want them out and they need to fend for themselves. And I try to not be in judgment. It's not my job to judge whether or not the siblings are using it or not. My job is I have a customer and they have a goal, and my job is to help them effectuate it. And so, but in some cases, it's sad to see the caregiver is legitimate and has made a sacrifice and maybe deserving of special treatment. And in many cases, I'd say more often, the caregiver is abusing the situation. The parent never really asked them for help, and maybe really exaggerates their role in it and then tries to leverage that to taking over the entire estate. And I see that happen all the time.
I could imagine. Oh my goodness. So now, how do we avoid probate?
Well, I don't know there's any way to guarantee avoiding it, but I will say that generally speaking, in anything in life, if you plan ahead, you're more likely to get a good outcome. And so for most people, a simple estate plan, and if you own real estate, that probably in California means having a trust, entitling the property in the trust, so that rather than going to court to resolve things, you have a trust that should resolve things or provide a framework for resolution. So the first thing I say, particularly if you own property and or you have children, get with an estate planning attorney and prepare a proper plan for your estate, and then review it at least every 3 to 5 years and make sure the plan you have is going to work. And here's the other thing. That plan does not just apply if you pass. Often people say, what do I care? I'll be dead by then. It also applies if you're incapacitated. God forbid you're in an automobile accident or some health issue and you can't take care of yourself. Who's going to make financial decisions, transferring money, opening accounts, paying bills, paying taxes, paying insurance? Those are things that people don't consider. I had a case where a longtime client who had, the man and woman lived together for like 30 years. They never got married because the wife had a divorce settlement from a prior marriage, so they didn't want to get legally married. But when she was incapacitated, her effective husband, but he really wasn't, couldn't get any information to help her, couldn't get medical information to help her, couldn't get the medical insurance to pay claims. It was a mess. And so what I would say is, we all have challenges, we all have circumstances, but we should plan for as many contingencies as we can. And I would say, generally speaking, that means getting with a great estate planning attorney and put a plan together that's appropriate for you, and then update it regularly.
That is that is really sage advice. But as life goes, Bill, people don't want to face the fact that eventually we're going to die. And last time I checked, nobody gets out alive, right? So
what?
Look at Elijah, right? But they don't want to face the fact that there is business, and maybe it's unpleasant. Maybe you didn't have the relationship with your daughter or son or your heirs, and but at the very last and the very least, if you don't take care of things, if you didn't leave a will, if you just have everything in probate. At least in California, we're a community property state. I can think of this instance. In fact, just recently asked the very same thing. The couple were married for 6 years, and she had a property before they got married. She died 2 years ago, and the property is still in her name. Her daughter, her heir, died last year. So technically, you would think that, hey, there aren't any other heirs, but that's not true, because the daughter had a father, and those people may be entitled to a portion of that estate. And so when we think about, well, they're not going to get it, or maybe your husband passed and you didn't like the stepchildren, leaving that to chance is not a good idea, is it?
No, I mean, I can't think of any circumstance where it's better. The thing I tell people is, if you don't have a plan, the state of California has a plan for you. And it's kind of like going to DMV.
Plan, not yours.
Right. And it's kind of like going to the DMV. It's just not as pleasant as going to the DMV.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Well, that is terrifying. Okay, so now let's say that you didn't have this, and now there's this process. Okay, so typically the heirs would go to a probate attorney, and hopefully the probate attorney would say, get yourself an expert in probate in real estate to effectuate the property and
They never do
dispose of the
that.
property. They
never
don't do
that.
it. Why?
I think, I'll say that in my experience, 90% of customers love their attorney when they start the probate process and hate them 90 days later. And there are a lot of great attorneys.
Why is that?
Well, because like in any industry, there's the top 10% that are great. And then there's the next 10, 20% that are above average. And there's the bottom 50%, which by definition are below average. And the reality is that those probate attorneys below average, the average probate attorney has done one probate in the last 12 months.
Right.
So how can you be good at anything that you only do one of? Probate is a very detailed, particular process, meaning it's not like hiring somebody just to go before the judge and speak eloquently. It's a lot of little details that have to be done right. And I find they have to have the right probate paralegal because there's so much detail work. It's not really complicated law for the most part. It's detail-oriented law. And so many attorneys who are great attorneys in divorces or in corporations or DUIs or civil litigation know nothing about probate. They're smart, so I figure they'll learn it. But the problem is you just can't learn by doing one when it comes down to those details. And as a result, their probate gets delayed and delayed and delayed. And here's the problem with it. It's never a problem until it's a problem. So for example, I had probates that were delayed and delayed, and then all of a sudden the global pandemic hit and courts were shut down for 6 months. All those people had problems. Another example is I've had cases where people are in probate and then somebody else dies, the person who was administrating the case. Well, if it takes months and months and months, the longer it goes, the more likely it is to happen. Or you have 3 or 4 siblings. At day one, they're all in agreement, kind of. 3 days later, there's a little bit of stress. But when it gets delayed 2 or 3 times, everybody's blaming everybody, and then it gets more hostile and becomes a problem. So like in real estate, I would say there's nothing good that happens from the day you file probate until the day it closes. There's nothing good that happens because all you want to do is sell the house and distribute the money. Everything is bad. The longer it takes, the more badness you have. And so I tell people is you want to find somebody who's an expert in what you need. Now, sometimes that means you just need a basic probate administrator. Sometimes it means you need a litigator. My brother filed the probate. He's a bad guy. He's trying to steal the property. That's a whole different attorney than the one who's good with the probate administration. There's some that specialize in litigation, some that only do litigation. And then there's avoiding probate, which would be an estate planning attorney. So you really want to find somebody who it fits the niche of what you need in the area that you work, in the county that you need it done. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be happy with the results. And again, my experience is 90% of the customers are not happy with the results they get.
Given to them, they think, wow, there's probably somebody better that can, and so they delay the process even more and more and more because they just keep changing attorneys, and the attorneys will get frustrated, right? Because they don't see progress being made. They see somebody standing in the way of getting things done. They don't want to be blamed for it. So they go to the court and say, I want to be excused or removed from the case, which causes an even farther and more aggravating delay. So some of the best things that we can think of in terms of what do we do and how do we pre-plan the eventuality of us leaving this world is, one, getting our personal property in order of where we want it to go, getting our will put in order, getting our estate as a whole by putting our real property into a trust. But that doesn't mean or guarantee that we won't be hit in a probate case. Would that be correct?
There's no guarantees. You know, it's one of those things where you just play the odds the best you can, but there is no guarantee.
Wow.
Anything. And I think I'll give you an example. I mean, just today, for example, I have a realtor friend of mine who calls me up on a probate. He says, well, the attorney says what happened was there's a property that's selling for, let's just say it's selling for $500,000. And the court does a date of death. We think of it as an appraisal. It's called an inventory and appraisal report. Not done by a standard appraiser. It's done by a subset of appraisers called probate referees. They're kind of like, and they don't go in the property. They're supposed to drive by the property. I don't think they actually even drive the property. So I have no idea the condition on the outside. As a realtor, my job would be to send them interior photos, exterior photos, to make it easy to say, hey, by the way, you're going to think the property is worth, in this case, $500,000. It's only worth $400,000 because it's uninhabitable on the inside. There's a roof leak. There's a this. There's a that. Here's the photos. And then they can at least hopefully make an informed decision. But if they're just looking at Zillow and they see the house when it sold 2 years ago, and they're going to appraise it, let's say, you can't sell it for that number. You can't sell it for 500. It's only worth 400. And so the realtor called me to say, well, the attorney says we have to sell it for at least 90% of the appraised value. And I said, well, that's not true in this case. In this case, the estate has full authority. They can sell for whatever they want to as long as all the other parties agree. And there's a process by which you get the agreement called a notice of proposed action. And so here's an attorney who went to law school, very impressive, nice office, has a secretary, has a whatever, paralegal, who you would look at and say, well, this guy knows everything.
Right?
No, not only does he not know everything, what he knows is wrong and is destructive to the family that he's getting paid to service. And so I think the thing I would say is that you really want to make sure you get to somebody who knows what they're doing in this area. Otherwise, you're going to spend more money and more time and aggravation than you should.
My goodness sakes, this is it's a terrifying world, and you just took me on a journey through hell called probate. So in order to bypass the biggest amounts of those problems associated with the passing of somebody you care about, or somebody's estate, more importantly, that you care about, encourage them to see an estate planning attorney and make sure that it's checked at least every 5 years. So, Bill, now there are the things that you like to talk about, and I see you at investment clubs all the time. And talk to me about some of the things that you really get excited about besides your podcast, because you are very animated on that podcast. And what is the name of it? Karen, put that up on the screen so people can see that.
Well, Probate Weekly, I actually have 4 podcasts. Probate Weekly is focused on probate and is for real estate investors and real estate agents who want to learn about probate. I interview attorneys, vendors, top real estate agents around the country. It's a national podcast as well. I have a second podcast, which is my weekly real estate update, where I just talk about the real estate market and update from my perspective, what I see as a practitioner in the business. I think one thing I would say is the news industry is broken. And a lot of us will look at politics, whether you're on the right or the left, whether you are a Biden person or Trump person, everybody agrees the news is terrible. And it's because the industry is broken. It no longer giving information to consumers. And so I think that it falls on us as professionals to educate and promote to our customers and our prospects what's really happening in the market. So I do that every week on a podcast on my real estate update. And then lastly, I have a new podcast I launched, which is doing great, called Real Estate Ripoffs, where I list different companies I believe are taking advantage of consumers in our market. Last week's episode was on Bank of America. And then this week's episode.
Oh my God, only here. You heard it here. He's about to launch this, and I'm going to tell you what, don't miss an episode. B of A, oh Lord. Well, B of A is not the only one that's done something. Wells Fargo, we don't have to look too far back, did something as well. So what did B of A do? I want to know.
Well, I did Wells Fargo before. I did Chase before. I did Redfin before. I did Zillow. So I try to take them all to task, and I'm willing to if there's somebody has some input, I'm glad to talk. But I think Bank of America, it's funny, the CEO, I don't know that you know this, he's an attorney. He's not a banker. The banks originally were designed to lend money to Americans to help us build businesses and buy houses and prosper. And really the banks have become kind of like these kingdoms where they really serve the management of the bank, not the consumer. We as Americans have turned over the power of our banking system to these masters of the universe And as a result, we pay high mortgage rates. We can't get mortgages. Our information's stolen all the time. If you wonder why you get robocalls and identity theft problems, it's because the banks protect themselves. They don't protect your information. And I think the worst part is when I started this business in 1986, the leading mortgage lenders were the leading banks and savings and loans because they had a responsibility to help us as consumers and residents. Instead, they don't really do that anymore. They do a lot because they're so big, but they really just buy other failed banks. They make other banks who are smaller compete, go broke, and they buy those banks for 10 cents in the dollar using our taxpayer guarantee as their currency to buy these smaller banks on the cheap. So I'm a little bit on a soapbox on that. I really feel like as consumers, if we don't, raise up and complain a little bit, then we're going to continue to be abused by, in this case, I think Bank of America, Chase.
How do we raise up and complain? Phil, you bring up a really good point. How do we raise up? How do we complain? If they're too big to fail and they're protected by the federal government, how do we as little people do something about it?
I think the first thing is that it's appropriate for us to mock and shame these people. I think that too often we're polite and evil people take advantage of polite people. And so one is that we should make sure that we don't encourage our children to go work for these bad companies, that we call them out when they act appropriately. When you're on the phone with them, make sure their employees know that you notice that what they're doing is wrong. Linda, you called me this morning to prepare for this call. I want to transfer my money from Vanguard because I'm buying a piece of property. I want to wire transfer some money. It's my money.
Right.
I called in 10 minutes. I'm on hold. I got on the phone call, I had to hang up. Called back 10 minutes, hold, had to hang up. When you called me, I was in the middle of a phone call and I picked up your call on my cell phone and we talked what we had to talk about and you hung up. I was on the call for 30 minutes to wire my own money from Vanguard. They should be shamed. So I went on to X, formerly Twitter. I'm going to talk about it here now and I'll write an episode on Vanguard because these companies are very big on protecting their corporate interests.
Their
and
own
they're very
interests,
poor on
absolutely.
taking care of customers.
Oh my God. This is crazy. They are using our money to lend, and yet we can't get access to it.
Yes. Well, you can just leave them and go find somebody else who'll take care of you.
We've got to work for it. Why should we have to work that hard? We had to work hard to get it. Why do we have to work hard to get it back?
Right. That's exactly right. So I think you have to be careful who you choose to do business with. And I think you should be quick to change when they give you bad service. Personally, I used to bank with Wells Fargo and I think they're a bad company. And my father-in-law was in the service. We qualify for USAA and I do my personal banking through USAA as we should be. We should raise our standards, hold them accountable. And I told the guy at the end, he goes, anything else to help you with? I said, yeah, this is disgraceful. It took 30 minutes to wire money. It shouldn't take that long. There's no security. There's no service that should take 30 minutes. It's your incompetence and your lack of respect for your customer that caused this to happen. I think we need to speak up. I think we need to tell the truth to them. I think they should be ashamed and should leave their job and go work for a company that treats customers better we need to empower people. That's the beauty of real estate. That's the beauty. I'm going to make more money on this one deal I'm buying than all year in my business. That's the American dream, what's possible. It's still possible. We can't let people give up on that. If you read the news in real estate, you would give up on ever buying property. You would give up on investing. You would give up on the American dream. Don't let them, because they just want you to be stupid and content with whatever bad service they give you. The opportunity exists in America to make more money more than ever. Don't let them talk you out of it. And then when they treat you poorly, change companies, change services.
And do it often. Sometimes we think, oh, well, I've been with this bank or, I've got a corporate account and it'd be too hard to do this. No, it's not. Don't be lazy. Don't be complacent because what you're doing is encouraging them and even paying them to keep serving you with bad service and bad business.
Exactly. And as a real estate agent, I will say, if I could add one more piece, is that I think we're under attack because we're one of the last bastions of freedom and of the American dream, of entrepreneurship. People can go out and get their license for $1,000, join the MLS and the association with a couple thousand, and you have a business where you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars if you work hard. The corporate bureaucracy doesn't want that to happen. And so they're attacking us, they're suing us, they're competing with us with Zillow and Redfin in a way that's attempting to drive us out of business. You know, the Zillow has never made any money and never paid for all their disrupting the economy. They've never paid any corporate income taxes, either federal or state. I have to pay taxes.
What?
Yeah. You know, Amazon, you know what built Amazon, if you really go back in time, when they started out, their advantage was they didn't pay sales tax.
Beyond
What originated with Amazon was they didn't pay sales tax.
crazy.
That's how they compete with
This
local
is
business.
absolutely
So
insane.
they put your neighbor
And
out
they're
of business.
making money hand over fist. And on top of this, Bill, hold on. They are not only in business because they had a thought and a competitive entrepreneurial idea, but we as real estate agents have paid our MLS to give our information away so that they can have a business that competes with us and takes us out. What's up?
Well, I think you're right, though I would say I think that we did that in good faith, expecting them to act in good faith, but evil people never act in good faith. The head of Zillow, the founder, was never a real estate agent. He doesn't care about customers. They don't sell people's houses and have relations with them. He's a venture capitalist making money for Wall Street investors. So again, I think that, look, realtors should give good service and we should give good information. I'm not saying don't use Zillow and suffer with bad information. I'm just saying, as a realtor, I would never pay Zillow a penny. And just know they're dishonest. Know these companies, all these corporations work together in harmony to attack us. And make sure you're getting good service. You're getting the value you want. And if you're in business, make sure you give your customers value.
Wow. So, Bill, what is the name of the podcast where you talk about ripoffs? I want to make sure that our listeners know where to find you.
So if you go to my YouTube channel, which is at Bill Gross Probate, is my YouTube channel.
We'll
on my
have that
channel
showing on the screen here in just a second. At
Probate.
Probate.
Bill Gross Probate.
Okay, at Bill Gross Probate. All right, there we go.
And you'll see on their podcasts, and there you'll be able to find that. And then I don't have the public chat, but the link specifically to my newest podcast, which is Real Estate Ripoff, where I take one company at a time and go through them and do my best. And I'm open. If you have a company that you want me to research and talk about, but I did Bank of America, the state of California, Chase, Redfin, credit agencies, and Zillow. And then I have attorneys and Wells Fargo kind of in queue I'm working on.
Oh my God. What a wealth of information. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today. I can't believe our time is already up, but there are tons and tons of questions I know that our viewers and listeners are going to want to know about. Do you have a phone number you can give them? Do you have a business line where people can reach out to you? Yeah,
you call me anytime. My direct line, 310-210-0008, 310-210-0008. I answer the phone. If I don't answer it, I'll get back to you or text you, whatever is appropriate.
That is awesome. Again, our probate expert with over 30 years of expertise, podcasting, telling us, educating us, keeping us from being ripped off from the people that we've been trusting. Thank you, Bill Gross. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. A pleasure.
Do you like to talk about money? If you do and you'd like to be a guest, contact me at lindak360.com.